Hello and welcome to your local part of the show. Hope it's warm enough for you. Now this week, does the Northern Powerhouse need a bit of a boost, a change in direction even? We report from a summit held in Newcastle this week. Jonathan Arnott, do councils get a, if you forgive the pun, a free pass on this, on whether they're to blame for this reduction in bus passenger journeys, or does the government have a lot of responsibility here as well?
I think there's a bit of both, because I think that councils really should be prioritising and really pushing frontline services and matters such as this are very important. But I think what you end up with is a downward spiral, effectively, that when you cut some number of bus services, then it becomes less convenient for people, and it's less convenient for people then use further buses and fewer buses, and then it goes on. And particularly in rural areas, there's a very, very strong case that the state should be making sure that there are sufficient subsidies, because for a lot of people in rural areas, there simply is no alternative, and when those bus services are cut completely, you've got very, very big problems.
OK, all right. Well, bus services matter to people. I'm sure we'll discuss them again in the future. Now, transport, whether buses, trains or roads, is a key part of the Northern Powerhouse, of course. And this week, to coincide with the Great Exhibition of the North, the government held a 3-day summit of business leaders in Newcastle, which it claimed would take the powerhouse into some form of overdrive. But 4 years after the whole idea emerged from the mind of former Chancellor George Osborne, what a place to be, has it really achieved anything significant? Well, honest with you. Jonathan Arnott, 4 years in, this policy is still going. Northern Powerhouse still remains an active term at least, but who's right on the health of it, Jake Berry or Chion Wura?
I hate to say this, but it sounds to me like Groundhog Day. You know, you're coming back and you're asking me the same questions that you were asking me 3.5, 4 years ago, and I was saying at the time, well, we'll see when we see the colour of their money. We'll see when that investment actually takes place, the investment that wasn't there in the North East, that has been there in London, in the South East for a very, very long time. And to be quite honest, what we're hearing now is the same sorts of promises. It's as if this Northern Powerhouse, in terms of transport at least, is as delayed as the trains are at the moment.
Very good line, obviously. But I've talked about some of the investment projects, but actually, isn't the Minister right also that actually you can't shut this off entirely? You can't say that any investment anywhere else in the country doesn't benefit the North. HS2 may well benefit parts of the north. And in addition, if you keep London and the capital healthy, you benefit the whole
Newcastle
country.
would find it very difficult to argue much benefit from HS2, but it's a huge amount of money that is being placed into those projects, which then leaves very little for transport in other areas of the country. What I will say is that there are some positives, and I'm not going to be here to completely criticise the government on everything. I think, for example, when you look at Ben Houchen talking about the Freeport idea and something that perhaps should be developed actually to help business to develop. The less regulation you've got, the less tax, the more positive you've got.
Breaks, post-Brexit,
those kinds of things can offer some kind of positive. It's much better to help business to help itself. And we've not even got started on high-speed internet and other things that we desperately do need to be pushing further.
Jonathan, one thing they can't ignore is that the government's record on unemployment is record low in the North East now. That's part of the Northern Powerhouse, isn't it?
Well, I think you're seeing cuts in unemployment across the country, and that is definitely something that has been a positive. And I'm not here to have a go at the government every single thing that they ever do. There's an awful lot of things that I think they have got wrong on the Northern Powerhouse. What I wouldn't say is that we've had this sort of amazing benefit in the North that isn't anything different to the rest of the country.
OK. Now, you might think today's two guests don't have a great deal in common. I do not disagree that much, but they are unlikely bedfellows in their support for Brexit. Ronnie Campbell is the only Labour MP in the North East or Cumbria who campaigned to leave the European Union, while Jonathan Arnott was also prominent in the Brexit campaign, stood for the leadership of UKIP before resigning from the party. Jonathan Arnott, haven't you, by becoming an independent, I know you had disagreements with UKIP, haven't you isolated yourself, rather, in kind of in terms of pursuing the kind of Brexit you want and you believe voters in the North East want? You and UKIP presumably were fighting for the same thing.
I think the problem is that UKIP have made themselves irrelevant in a lot of ways. They've changed their views, their beliefs, their policies and their approach towards Brexit has been one which hasn't really been necessarily that constructive in terms of negotiations, and in a sense they made it very difficult for themselves even to get any media coverage, because the way they've gone about it means that they've then got nothing to say at each step of negotiations. So I think they've put themselves in a very, very difficult position indeed in that sense.
But nothing's more irrelevant than being a one-man band, isn't it? At least they've got a party still, and they'll get party election broadcasts and things like that. Well,
you look at UKIP, I mean, they had 4.5 million voters at one point, and they've thrown away almost 4 million of those. And the reason is, I think, that when you stop as a party listening to people, when you stop actually talking about the things that people are interested in and what to talk about, and you start lecturing them instead, especially when you move your policy to do so, that then makes them irrelevant. There are literally millions of people out there, hundreds of thousands in the North East, who have now got nobody to vote for.
Jonathan Arnott, who do people from UKIP turn to? Maybe to Ronnie Campbell here. He's a Brexiter now. So.
Do you know, I think this is the big problem in British politics at the moment. I think there are now millions of people out there who just simply do not know who to vote for at the next election. I think parties, Labour have moved substantially in a different direction further left. The Conservatives don't seem to know what they believe. UKIP have tacked much further right. So I don't think people know who to vote for.
We don't know.
One positive, look at the individual candidates.
That is it from us. Next weekend for the Don Gala. Now it's back to Sarah.